Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're reviewing the new album from the Foo Fighters, Concrete and Gold. Alright folks, today we're talking about the new Foo Fighters album, and the Foo Fighters happen to be my favorite band, so coming into this album, of course, I was rather excited. Now, kind of leading up to this album, and really just from their last album, Sonic Highways, which was kind of an album that, while I enjoyed it, it wasn't exactly my favorite in the Foo Fighters discography. I was just kind of, it was a good album, but not one of my favorites. Really, that's how I would describe it, and that's how many other fans really felt with that project. Felt like there was a lot of potential there it didn't exactly live up to. But, still, it was a decent project, I guess. And then we got the St. Cecilia EP in 2015, which I actually really enjoyed. In fact, if I was to make a list of my top 10 projects of that year, there's a good chance it probably would have been in that top 10. But, after that, a couple months later, they kind of said, or, I think it was actually with the release of that EP, they said that they were going on an indefinite hiatus. And, of course, being a Foo Fighters fan, that's a bit concerning because, are they breaking up? Are they just taking a break? But I wasn't expecting any Foo Fighters material for a while, pretty much. However, not too much later, just in June of this year, we got the lead single out for this project entitled Run. And, so I guess they're back making new music. And that really is the case here because we got a new album here, Concrete and Gold, today. Now, if you want to see my reviews for the tracks of Run and The Sky is a Neighborhood, the first two singles that were released from this project, they're going to be linked in the description if you want to hear my initial thoughts on those songs as those were released. But, in the context of this album, my opinions on the songs are, maybe slightly different than they initially were. And I just want to start off by talking about maybe some of those two tracks. For starters, Run, like I said in my initial track review of that song, I think it's a great song. I really like how they managed to combine some of the heavier elements of this band that they've, done before in the past with some softer, more melodic moments. I love how they switched up from the very aggressive verses to the more just melodic and calming choruses. And still, listening to this album multiple times over the past few days in preparation for this review, I still love this song to death. Every time it comes on, I really like it. And The Sky is a Neighborhood, in my initial review, I said that I liked the track. However, it wasn't like one of my favorites or anything like that. However, I'm starting to change my mind a little bit on that. The more I listen to this song, especially in the context of this record, the more I really grow to love this song. I just love how they're able to take, their typical sort of rock sound and combine it with a bit of more of a pop sensibility, and not in the sense that, they're taking all these elements that are really popular in pop music nowadays, like more electronic or trap elements, and trying to put it into their music. By pop elements, I mean like they have this very big and grand sort of chorus that's just so easy to sing along to. I can imagine when they're playing this song live in their upcoming tours and just live performances, that this song is going to be a really popular song to play live because I can just easily see the audience singing aloud to this song together with the band, and it's just going to be so much fun. I can see it already. So I've really grown to like that song also a lot. So, with these two songs that I do really like, how does the rest of Concrete and Gold hold up? To be honest, to be completely honest, it's just, alright in my opinion. It's a good album, but not one of my favorites from the Foo Fighters. In a sense, this album kind of reminds me of Sonic Highways in some degrees. My biggest complaint really with Sonic Highways was that despite the fact that, they had this whole concept surrounding the record concerning different cities and trying to pull different influences from the sounds of those cities, I don't really feel like they lived up to that, I guess you could say concept within all the songs. They still felt a bit too Foo Fighter-ish, too typical Foo Fighter-ish, I guess you could say, for that concept. And, to an extent, I kind of get that here on this album as well. While there are lots of sort of nuanced new things that they're doing here on this project, for the most part, it does kind of feel like a typical sort of Foo Fighters album. And if you're a Foo Fighters fan, maybe that's a good thing. And, if you like all the Foo Fighters' previous efforts, chances are you're going to really like what's provided here, because to a degree, it is kind of what you're used to. However, for someone like me who is, a big Foo Fighters fan, I do like to see bands that I like experimenting with new ideas and new concepts. And, just kind of based on Run and The Sky is a Neighborhood, which both kind of showed off some newer things in them, like how I mentioned before, Run with, having those very aggressive verses and the more relaxed, laid-back sort of melodic choruses. And then Sky is a Neighborhood with its very, grand poppy hook that's just so infectious. I was kind of expecting this album to be a bit more, just different overall, I guess you could say. What we get here, for the most part, I think, like I said before, is more typical sort of Foo Fighters stuff. And I just want to say, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I still do like this album overall. I'm just not, super in love with it like I am some of their other projects. And the thing is, still, with this album, like as I said before, Run showed off a very aggressive side and the softer side in it all at once. And that's kind of what I was expecting for this album overall. And based on some interviews and some things I heard some of the band members saying about this project, it's kind of what I was expecting. I believe they mentioned something about it being very aggressive with a more pop sensibility or something along those lines. And for the most part on this project, you do have some more aggressive moments thrown in there on occasion, but you also have a lot more just, I guess you would say, tracks that are similar to the more melodic part of Run, just some more laid-back tracks, especially in the second half of this album, where lots of the songs are just a bit slower and softer in terms of the sound. Now, of course, to varying degrees, and I'm not saying that these songs all sound super alike, they definitely don't, but still, I would have preferred some more aggressive moments thrown in there as well, because I feel like this album, despite the fact that it was kind of based on Run and some of the things the band members were saying, how it was kind of promising a nice balance between the more aggressive and not as aggressive sound, I definitely feel like it leans more towards the not as aggressive for the most part on this project. The album starts off with a track titled T-Shirt, which just from its opening is a very soft sort of opening track, and it really was kind of reminding me of the track Doll, the opening song from The Color and the Shape. How that started off being rather soft before going into a more aggressive track. But this track kind of makes itself a bit different, because though it has this very soft opening at the beginning, it does kind of increase in energy towards the end a bit. Though it is still sort of a short opening type track, it definitely is a bit enjoyable, and it's a nice start to the album before heading into Run, which, like I said before, is a track that I do really, really love. And then we have the track Make It Right, which is kind of interesting because it actually features vocals from Justin Timberlake, of all people, because, he's exactly who you would expect to be on a Foo Fighters record. And, I was actually kind of excited to hear his contribution to this project, because I do think he's a good singer, and, just being that the style of music that he typically makes is very different from the Foo Fighters, I just thought that, there was going to be something really interesting going on here. However, his vocal parts are very minuscule, very background. In fact, if you didn't know that he was featured on this track, you probably wouldn't have believed it if I had told you. But yeah, he definitely is there to some degree. He's just not very much. And this, right here kind of encapsulates my problem with the album as a whole to a degree. It kind of has the Foo Fighters, wanting to experiment with something different, getting a pop star, putting it on their album. But, they just don't want to fully commit to the concept. They want to kind of keep it back to, this typical sort of Foo Fighters sound a bit too much, so that, they never get to the point of fully experimenting with something different. And that's just a problem I see really here on this project, as well as Sonic Highways, like I said before. It's just kind of noticeable here on this track, Make It Right. However, I don't want to say that the song is bad. It still is a rather enjoyable song, and it definitely is one of the more aggressive moments here on this project, which, like I said before, I felt like it was kind of lacking overall. So this song is rather enjoyable within the context of the whole project. I just wish Timberlake's parts were a bit more prominent and that he had a bit more to do here on this track. The track Sunday Rain that we get later on in this album is another song that has some interesting features and just things going on. For one thing, you have Mr. Paul McCartney of the Beatles, or formerly of the Beatles, I guess you could say, doing the drums here on this track. And then you have Taylor Hawkins, the typical drummer for the Foo Fighters, doing the lead vocals here on this track. I know it's not the first time that he's done, stuff like this, whether it be in the studio or live, but I like his vocals here on this track. It provides for a nice change of pace in the second half of this album, because though Sunday Rain is a bit of a slower song still, the fact that you have his vocals there instead of Dave Grohl's is a nice change of pace, and his vocals still do fit nicely with the Foo Fighters sound, and overall it's just a very interesting track as a result of that. The closing track, Concrete and Gold, once again is another kind of slower song that just towards the end of it kind of just slowly fades away as the album closes out, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. I do like how kind of slow and just, I guess you could say, laid back to a degree that this track is. Though I can't say the same thing for every song here at the end of the album. Dirty Water, I do like some of the stuff going on here on this track. It's just, doesn't really stand out to me compared to some of the other slower tracks that we get here, like the beforehand mentioned Sunday Rain or Concrete and Gold, or even the track Happy Ever After 0 Hour, which is more of an acoustic leaning track, and kind of distinguishes itself in the track listing by being that. But still, it's just kind of typical in my opinion. This is an enjoyable song. It just doesn't quite get to the point of being so new or interesting that it's like super new for this band, I guess you could say. Overall, Dave Grohl's vocal performance here on this project, I was kind of expecting it to be a bit more all over the place, like I kind of mentioned before, in terms of aggression and, you know, kind of holding back that aggression a bit, like on Run. However, Run is probably the most aggressive he gets here on this project, which is a little bit disappointing, but, you know, his softer vocals are also rather nice, so, you know, I guess it kind of works out fine in the end. And that's really the thing about this album. Despite some of these complaints that I have for some of these songs and everything like that, it still ends up being fine in the end, but, you know, only just fine. The album, while it does have its standout moments like Run or The Sky is the Neighborhood, there are other tracks that just are kind of, you know, I'm kind of indifferent towards them. Like, I don't have a problem listening to them, they don't sound bad, they're good songs, I guess I could technically say. It's just that when I listen to them, they don't really strike me as being super interesting, especially compared to some of the other material that the Foo Fighters have put out in the past. And I just kind of wish that on this project they maybe should have just stepped out of their comfort zone a bit more for some of these songs. I definitely feel like they did that on some of the tracks like Run or The Sky is the Neighborhood, like I mentioned before, or even a track like Someday Rain in terms of, you know, switching up the vocals. But still, like, I would have preferred maybe a bit more of that here on this album to kind of distinguish it from some of the Foo Fighters' previous efforts, because looking at this album, I'm kind of trying to give it an identity of its own within the discography of the Foo Fighters, and it's not exactly the easiest thing for me to do, to be honest. And that's coming from, you know, a pretty big Foo Fighters fan. Like I said before, they're my favorite band, and I'm kind of having trouble placing what exactly this album is trying to go for, really, in terms of the context of the rest of the Foo Fighters' works. The only thing that really kind of stands out here on this project as being, you know, distinctly this project has to do with some of the lyrical themes concerning politics. Now, of course, the Foo Fighters aren't a super political band. However, it was mentioned in, I believe, some interviews with Dave Grohl that some of the lyrics here are somewhat political. However, it's not super, you know, obvious, and, you know, they kind of leave it open to interpretation. Something that the Foo Fighters have really always done whenever they've decided to occasionally, you know, go into some political lyrics on their previous songs. They kind of always leave it open to interpretation so that, you know, it's not super overtly political, but, you know, if you kind of understand them and look at them as being political, it definitely does make sense. And I can definitely see that for some songs here on the album, like La Di Da, for example, or the track The Line, which definitely does have a sort of, I guess you could say, even apocalyptic feel, I guess you could say. I feel like it's a bit overblown. Maybe not apocalyptic, maybe something a little bit less than that, but, you know, I guess it makes sense, to be honest, giving it its kind of identity of its own, especially with the political atmosphere that's present now. But, you know, it's like I said before, it's not super obvious or in your face, so that might not even stand out to you unless if you're, you know, like me and you follow like what the band is saying about the album and things like that. Unless you saw that Dave Grohl was saying that some of the lyrics were inspired by political things. If you didn't know that, you may not have even picked up on that by listening to the album. So yeah, for the most part, when it comes to this new Foo Fighters album, Concrete and Gold, I think it's a good project, like I said before. And, you know, throughout this review, I've definitely been saying a lot of negative things about the project. But, you know, still, like I said, everything here is pretty solid all the way through. It's just that I had higher expectations, I think, than, you know, and as a result, it seems more like I'm talking a lot more negatively about some of these tracks. All the songs on this project are solid, and they're all enjoyable. If you're a Foo Fighters fan, you're going to enjoy something here on this project, because either they're occasionally experimenting with some newer stuff, or they're, you know, sticking very much to the formula that they've established for themselves already and are able to pull it off rather well. And, you know, once again, I just want to stress that I do enjoy this project. I do like all the songs that are provided here. It's just compared to some of the other Foo Fighters albums and some of the other songs that they put out in the past, not many of the tracks here on this album really stand out to me or really jump off the page as much to me as, you know, so a lot of the songs on their previous albums. So overall, I'd have to recommend this album to you if you're a Foo Fighters fan. Because, like I said before, there's going to be at least something on here that you enjoy. However, if you're someone who's not really into the Foo Fighters, if their sound just doesn't really appeal to you, or if you've just kind of maybe gotten a bit tired of their sound over the years, then this probably isn't the project to really change your mind concerning them. Because, like I said before, it is pretty much a very typical Foo Fighters album. Lots of the changes that are present here on this album are rather nuanced, rather small, and, you know, while some fans may be able to pick up on them and enjoy them, for the most part, it doesn't exactly do enough to really make this album stand out a ton compared to some of the other projects that the Foo Fighters have put out in the past, which I just think are a lot more interesting. So overall, yeah, I would recommend this album. I think it's a solid project, like I said before. I don't want anyone thinking that I don't like this project, because I know it does seem like I was a bit negative here in this review, just because, like I said, I did have higher expectations for the project. But yeah, you know, I like it. So if you enjoyed this review, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews. Comment down below your thoughts on this album. I would greatly appreciate seeing what you thought of this project. Did you think it was interesting or was more interesting than I thought it was? Follow me on all the social medias linked in the description as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.